Hello, and welcome to Basic Folk, a podcast where we have honest conversations with folk musicians, folk being a very broad kind of catch-all term, because today, excited to be talking to a gospel musician, Almeta Ingram-Miller of the legendary Ingramettes, is working to preserve the legacy of her mother, Maggie. Maggie was born in 1930 in Georgia. She taught herself piano in order to nurture her gift of singing. She would sing while working in the cornfields as a young girl, and she moved to Florida after marrying at 16 and having 3 children. Almeta's father left the family, which led Maggie to pursuing music as a way to provide for her children. She actually got all of her kids to sing because there were no childcare options. After moving to Richmond, Virginia, Maggie, who was always trying to do the right thing, got involved in a lot of social justice issues. She opened her home as a halfway house for women just out of prison. She would provide transportation to families visiting incarcerated relatives and delivered free food to the needy. In our interview, Almeta reflects on what it was like to grow up with such an amazing woman, not only as a mother, but as a musical partner. Singing with her mother was unlike anything else. Almeta would sing backup and acted as a sparring partner. Almeta talks about what it's like to keep her mother's story and mission alive through music, as well as including her own identity in that work. This was an absolute pleasure and honor to speak to the very inspiring Almeta. We're going to take a listen to a song from the latest album from the legendary Ingramettes. This song is called The Family Prayer, and then we'll get to our conversation with the very inspiring Almeta Ingram-Miller from the legendary Ingramettes on Basic Folk.
Come on, come on, come on, you come on, break up, come on, you come on, oh come on, and let's have family prayer. Come on, we need to have more family prayer. Come on, and let's have family prayer. Kneel down, it's a good old way. Come on, and let's have family prayer. Come on, everybody, we need to have family prayer.
Almeta, thank you so much for talking to me today.
Well, thank you, Cindy, for inviting me to the podcast. I'm very excited to be here.
Oh, great. Well, I'm excited to talk to you. Your story actually starts with your mother, Maggie Ingram, who was born in Coffee County, Georgia in 1930. And it seems as though no one else in her family was musically inclined, but she taught herself piano and discovered that she had a gift of singing and would sing while working in the cornfields. And what do you know about your mother's experience that started off with her singing while working in the fields? And how do you think that shaped the vocalist she would become? And then also maybe how did that experience shape the way she taught you how to sing?
I really do, and I really do believe that experience is what shaped her gifts. I believe that was a gift from God to her, but that having to it would shape what she would do later on, in that just about all of the music we sing about experiences, true experiences in her life and now even in our lives. You are correct in that she's the only person in her family that was musically inclined. Her family was a family of sharecroppers in Coffee County, Georgia, a little town called Douglas in Coffee County. And what sharecroppers are, you will work the land, and what you get is a share of the crops. It's very little money, and so now you're just barely making enough to feed your family. And what you cannot grow yourself, what those things that you need to buy, shoes or those type of goods, you get credit at at the store, at the country store. And so it's a system that perpetuates you to be in debt, and you never really work yourself out of debt because you're never paid enough to get out of debt. And so that situation, though it might seem hopeless, I believe it was the music. It was the music that kept her hope alive, that kept that fire lit in her. She did just sit down to the piano, an old upright piano in the barn there. They worked on a cotton plantation. It was owned by the Mulholland family. That family is still in Douglas, Georgia, by the way. I looked them up not too long ago. And the cotton plantation was owned by the Mulholland family. The quarters, the mill quarters is what they called them, which would have been in earlier times referred to as slave quarters. People are always very surprised when they learn that I am only 2 generations removed from someone born on a slave plantation. And you look at me here in 2021 and you go, oh, that was hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Well, not so long ago. Yeah. Because my grandmother was born on Mulholland's that same plantation. So I believe that the music that God deposited in her, not only to keep her hope alive, but here is a gift that would keep on giving even in later years. And she is the only person in her family that plays or sings and it did shape. I believe it did shape the way that she taught us to sing, because she did find herself in a situation. She married my dad. His family was a sharecropping family as well, the Ingram family. Her maiden name is Dixon, and the Ingram family was a sharecropping family on the same plantation. She married my dad at the ripe old age of 16, and after my 3 brothers were born, he moved the family to Miami, Florida, because he had family there, and they felt that the situation economically would be better for them if they were able to get off the plantation, and they've got this growing family. We got to Miami, Florida. The family got to Miami, Florida, and that is where my sister and I were born. We were actually born in Dade County in Miami, Florida. And so once we got there with 5 children now, that got to be a bit much for Dad. He really just literally abandoned the family down there in Florida. And the only thing I remember hearing her as a child to consistently pray, God, just help me keep my family together. I just want to keep my family together. She was only like 20. She's in her 20s. And she's got 5 children and, several family members. Lord love them. They thought they were helping when they said, well, if you send me the boys, I had an uncle with a tobacco plantation in North Carolina. He just wanted the boys. He said, well, I can't use your girls, but just send me your boys and I'll let them work on the farm and I'll send you something every month. Then I have another aunt. She had a sister up in New Jersey. She said, well, if you send me your oldest daughter, I could kind of train her to help me take care of my mother-in-law. But the little one is too little and I don't have any use for your boy. So, family members, they were giving her. At that time, my dad left us in 1956. I was like 4 going on like 5.
Wow.
And and so these
you were going to take care of an elderly person.
Well, hey, I actually, when you're little and you have responsibilities. I grew up helping take care of my little sister and even my brothers who were all older than me, because that's what the oldest daughter does. Mm-hmm. That's our culture. That's our, that's the belief. That's what the oldest daughter does. And that kind of, to them, those were viable options for this young mother who, you're young enough to find somebody else, but nobody's going to want you with 5 kids. And that, maybe if you didn't have so many kids, but it was just her goal that, Lord, help me keep my family together. That was her consistent prayer, to keep the family together. And so that shaped the way she taught us to sing, because that is what he said. She tells the story all the time. God says, what do you have? And she remembered the story of Moses when he gets to the Red Sea with a rod in his hand, and the sea is in front of them, and Pharaoh's army is behind him. And God says, what do you have in your hand? Well, I have nothing here except a rod. Says, what do you have, Maggie? I don't have anything but the 5 children. So I'm going to make a way for you through the 5 children. And I believe it. I believe, as she has told us so many times before, that is what inspired her. That while other children were outside playing hopscotch and the little boys playing marbles, we were sitting in the little living room in the little 2-3 room house we lived in, and she had us sitting in a circle. She had broken a branch off one of the trees to use that to beat time and keep time, to teach us timing when we sang. And she sat us around in a circle and taught all of us each of the parts that we would later sing.
How did the kids take to the music? And then also, how did she present this new reality of being a family band to the children?
That, you got to remember, it's a different time now, and children do what they're told, and you don't and you don't question. Back then, it was a different day. It didn't really matter if we wanted to do it or not. It was what we were told we were going to have to do. We did know the reality of our situation. I hear that a lot of times from people. Oh, we were poor, but we didn't know we were poor. Cindy, we were poor, and we knew we were poor. My mama had 3 boys, and for a long time only owned 2 pair of pants, so that when it was time to go to school, 2 of the boys went to school and 1 stayed home. The next day, the one that stayed home, he went with one of the other boys, and then the other boys stayed at home. And that went on for quite a while, until she got 75 cents together and went to the Goodwill store and bought a 3rd pair of pants. No, we were poor and knew we were poor. So the reality of what was going on with us, we knew that. Did we understand that? Singing as a group together, we didn't understand it, but my mom understood it, because her first group encounter singing was not with the Ingramettes. My mom sang with choirs in the church, and they had little groups there in Miami that she had sang with before. She started singing with a group called the Six Trumpets. This was a male quartet. And so our traditional gospel music has always been followed the male quartet genre. And it wasn't like the female contemporary singers that you hear today. It was always that hard gospel, the traditional gospel feel, traditional gospel tempos, but the music was always a song written about her life. And so we understood. When she sang songs to us, and that we were actually singing about our life, but that we always were presented with the option of hope because of your faith. So the songs always present that option. So the song might start out a little rough, but by the time it gets to the end, there's rejoicing and there's hope. So
it sounds like there was a lot of gospel music, maybe only gospel music, in your house growing up. And I'm wondering, and that is the style of music that your mother taught you and your siblings to sing. And there's also this talk of that there was no rock and roll, there was no pop music in your house growing up. Can you just break down for those who don't know, the difference between gospel music and other types of music that we might hear and think is gospel music?
Okay. Well, here, just to be very clear, and honestly, gospel music, that music genre, those other genres of music, the blues and rock and roll, see, the only difference there are the words. You'll find the same melodies, you'll find the same syncopations, you'll find even some of the same melodies between rock and roll and gospel music. Now you're correct in that that's the only music that was played in the house when I was growing up. But here's the kicker. It wasn't African American gospel music that we grew up on. Our roots are deep in the South. This is Coffee County, Georgia, and the only thing that you're going to hear there is Southern gospel music, and none of that's being sang by people who look like us.
Wow.
And so I woke up every Sunday morning. Grandma had this radio in her house. It ran by batteries, and her little church would go down to the radio station on Sunday morning, and they had a little 15-minute broadcast where the preacher preaches, on Sunday morning. You get to hear it over the radio. But every Sunday morning, I woke up to the lyrics of the song, "On a Sunday morning in Dixie, listen to the church bells ring." And so it was the cathedrals, and I grew up on the Happy Goodman singers, and it was not the music that we sing. I grew up listening to
the Happy Goodman singers are white gospel singers.
Absolutely,
Wow.
And I grew up listening to those quartets, but because that's the only music that was on the radio at the time, and so even though we grew up with that kind of music, there was in our culture we had black quartets, and now you go all the way back. Now you go all the way back to the Fairfield Four. You go way back. You go way back to Reverend Julius Cheeks and the Sensational Nightingales, and these are the people and that we would eventually get to share the stage with some of them. But there was no other music. Gospel music is rooted in Bible. Gospel means good news, and it's good news that's written in the Bible, that no matter how bad things are going for you, this is gonna, this goes all the way back to when African ancestors were brought over here on slave ships. And so, the masters bring them to church with them. And our ancestors hear this story about how these people are in Egypt enslaved, and then how this God, with his great power and strength, he gets them out of slavery into freedom. And so my ancestors would sit up in the balcony of the church, because they weren't allowed to sit down on the lower level with the slave masters, and they would listen to this message, and somebody got to thinking, okay, if this thing works out for the Israelites, why not us? And they begin to believe that these things can really happen for them. And out of that is birthed a Harriet Tubman, somebody who really believes that if this great God, because we came over here not knowing the Christian God. Africans have always had belief, but and some people say, oh no, they worship the trees, and but no, who they worship is somebody greater. They even back then they knew, oh man, this big ocean that we're on, somebody other than us had to create this. So they've always had this belief in a higher power, in a higher being. Just didn't have structure put to it until they get to this land where they're treated harshly and forced to work as slaves. And somebody listens to this gospel message, this message in the Bible, because Christianity is supposed to, tame these savage, Africans, and they listen to this thing and they grab a hold of this and say, look, if this thing worked this just might work for us. How about we ask this God? How about we ask this God for freedom? Yeah, so that is what gospel music is entrenched in. It is rooted in that. And yes, they sang that in the fields because that gave them hope. That gave them hope. I could not imagine. It's really strange because we were traveling to South Carolina. And I looked back in the van one Sunday, and Mommy was back there. She was just crying. I said, you okay? She said, I'm just thinking about it. That, we're complaining because it took us 6 hours to drive from Richmond down here to Lake City, South Carolina. Can you imagine our ancestors walked? They walked. They couldn't walk during the day, walked from South Carolina past Virginia because that was still, that wasn't far enough away from the Mason-Dixon line.
Right.
And we're sitting here complaining because we've only had 2 breaks in the van. Well, so, yeah, but that's gospel music is entrenched in that. And so she just looks at her life. And no, we're not allowed to listen to the rock and roll music. We're not, while all of this is going on as little kids. But if you fast forward, yeah, later in years, because I do have formal training in music, I now begin to have an appreciation for all types of music and to see how it can all wrap together. And so you will hear that. The album that we just did, take a look in the book. We did a cover of Bill Withers' Grandma's Hands. Because to me, that song is just a pure gospel. I know it's Bill Withers, and but it's Grandma's hands, clapped in church on Sunday morning. Grandma's hands played the tambourine so well. It's exactly what happened to me. Grandma's hand used to issue out a warning. Mita, don't you run so fast. You might fall on a piece of glass. There might be snakes there in that grass. Grandma's hand used to hand me a little piece of candy. Grandma's hand picked me up each time I fell. To me, that's just classic gospel. I know it's Bill Withers, but I have a great appreciation for that music. I really do.
So let's take it back. Everybody moved. Your mom moved everybody to Richmond, Virginia, because one of your brothers had a heart condition and you needed to live in a cooler climate. How old were you when that happened, and what was it like when you first arrived, and how did you like your new town?
I was 9 years old. I'll never forget it. It was Christmas Eve of 1961. We pulled into Richmond, Virginia. I'll never forget it. I remember the entire trip. Just like, because you got to understand now, there is no Interstate 95 that connects Florida to Virginia. Okay, you got to understand. And this is 1961. We've not yet evolved into all the wonderful civil rights that are to come. And we got to go through every little town between Florida and Virginia, which means Georgia and South Carolina and North Carolina. And that was a scary ride, Cindy. That that was in the day. Mommy's got a 1956 green and white Chevy Bel Air. She bought it from one of the white students over at the University of Miami. And he sold it to her. And that's back in the day when you could let a child ride up in the air pocket that in the back seat. You got this space between the back seat and the rear window. And my sister, she was a little girl. She rode there. They'll probably pull you over and give you a ticket now if you try to do that. But back in those days, nobody, no seat belts, none of that stuff. But when we got here, it was Christmas Eve. December in Virginia means cold and snow. And so we leave this tropical climate. We didn't even own a sweater. My mom had to try to go to the Goodwill store and try to find a sweater for us before we left Florida. And so we get here. we get to Richmond, Virginia, and the pastor of our church, we belong to Wells Temple Church of God in Christ. That's actually still down in Miami. And our pastor contacted the bishop here in Virginia for the Church of God in Christ. That was David C. Love, Bishop Love, and said, hey, listen, I got some members. They're coming there. They don't know anybody. But, she says that God has told her this is the place for her to go. And she and her 5 children are coming. And by the time we got here, one of the deacons, the pastor had arranged a little house over on 8th Street, downtown Richmond. There were some row houses on North 8th Street. If you go there now, J. Sargent Reynolds Community College downtown campus is there. It's built on that site now. But that's where we went. It had a big potbelly stove in the front room. Mommy went down in the basement and got some coal out of the basement. You put coal in the stove and built a fire and laid us around the coal stove, and we spent our first night in our new land, for us, which was Richmond, Virginia.
We've talked about this a little bit. You grew up in the segregated South and have experienced some pretty terrible things as a young African American, which I can let you expand on. And you've talked about how you channeled those experiences when performing. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
I can. And we did grow up in segregated South. I often tell this story on our way to Richmond, Virginia. Now I'm 9 years old, and my mom is driving, and she's so tired. We're in South Carolina now, and she can't drive another. I got to pull over and get some rest. And the only place to pull over is a service station that's not open. We don't see lights on it. We pull in there, and she pulls into the parking lot, and I look up and I say, Mommy, there's a sign there that says white only. We can't stop here. And she looks at me and she says, I know, I see that. But we'll be okay. You guys just get some sleep. I'm just going to sleep for a minute. And no sooner had I said that than here comes somebody, oh my God, just the biggest white guy in coveralls and oh my goodness. He comes to the window of the car and he knocks on it and he says, hey gal, you can't stop here. And she says, sir, listen, I'm sorry. It's just me and my children. I'm not going to let them get out of the car. We're not going to get out. I just need to get some rest. And if you just let me get a little rest here, I promise you, as soon as I sleep for an hour or so, I'll get up and we'll drive on and we'll be out of your way. So he turns on his heel and he walks back into the service station. He comes back out with a chair and the biggest shotgun I have ever seen in my life. Well, it's 9 years old. I guess any shotgun would be big. He takes the chair and he slammed it down on the sidewalk there in front of the store. He sits in it and he sits the rifle across his lap and he says, y'all go ahead on and sleep. I'm going to watch over y'all while you sleep. About 3-4 hours later, he knocks on, we saw the sheriff's car come through not long after Mama was asleep with the lights and everything. And I looked out the window, I peeked and I saw him wave the sheriff on. A few hours later, he wakes my mama up. He taps on the window. And he says, you all right in there? She said, yeah, we were just getting ready to go. He said, well, before you go, you take the children on in the restroom and get them washed up and everything. And y'all use the restroom. And then you can come on and go. We come out, we get back in the car. He's got some little bags. He says, listen, have you eaten? She said, well, no. And he's got some little crackers and sodas out of his machine there. And he gives that to Mama. And then he says, gal, have you got gas to get where you're going? And she says, well, I was going to stop at the next colored service. He said, well, you back your car up to the station here. I'm going to fill up your tank. Now you gotta understand that gas back in those days was 17 cents a gallon. So we filled up the tank with 17 cents a gallon gas, and we were able to come on into Virginia. So though every time we've had any, oh my goodness, and we've had a lot of experiences where it didn't turn out like that. But you think about the one that did turn out like that.
Gosh, you must have been scared out of your mind when you saw that shotgun.
I gotta tell you,
what's gonna happen here?
Listen, at my grandma's house there in Georgia, she kept us during the summers, and I'll never forget the morning that we couldn't go outside to play. And we just wondered why, because every morning we got up and did the same thing. You go outside and you play in the dirt and you make mud pies and, so we couldn't go out that Sunday. And she just told us, and, we were whining and wanting to go out. And she's telling us, be quiet. I want y'all to go back in your room. I want you to get back in the bed. But the sun's up, get back in the bed. And what had happened, someone had been lynched on the tree outside of our house. And they had sent for some of the deacons from the church to come and cut him down. And she's sitting there up against the door with a rusty old rifle across her lap. And that's where she had slept all night long, up against the door, because she didn't know, if they were going. They knew that there were black people living in the little house there, because that's all that was in that area. Us and the little lady's little house attached to ours. And she didn't know if they were going to get all crazy and try to come in and lynch us. So she sits up all night with the rusty rifle across her lap, praying that, they don't come in. But we couldn't come outside because someone had been lynched on a tree outside of the house. So, yeah, we've seen the other side of it. We've seen the other side of it as well. But it to me, it makes it when something happens like what happened at that service station in South Carolina, and I would have to get a little older before I could appreciate what the man did, that he actually put himself in harm's way to protect us.
Can you talk about what it was like to sing with your mom? You sang backup for her, but you also acted as a vocal sparring partner, which what does that mean? And then how is it different to do it with your mom?
Oh my goodness. Oh, listen, if people ask me, who's your favorite singer? My mom, hands down. My mom is the greatest. Look, no, she's just the greatest singer. My mom could do more sitting in a wheelchair than most people can do standing up. I gotta tell you, there was a specialness about her, and it is called an anointing. It is called an anointing, that she could sing the same song that someone else could sing, but the music just lifted itself up, and you could feel the things that she was feeling when she sang. And that's the difference. She was a powerhouse. And now you got to remember, I was trained to sing backup for her. From a little child. When she sat us around in the circle, I wasn't but about 4 years old then. My sister was maybe 3 or something like that, 2 going on 3. You got to remember, she trained us to sing backup for her. So coming up through the years, to me, that was the greatest thing I was ever going to do, was, to sing backup for her. But as I got older, she, and even then, I didn't know it, but even then she was preparing me to do the work with the group that I'm doing now. She was preparing me for this even then. And yes, I did. Listen, several of our recordings, you'll hear somebody in the background, they'll say, "Sing, mama," and that's me. And that's me. It's always a call and response. It's the same thing as a call and response. You hear it. That's the kind of singing that grew out of our African American culture, because we could not afford songbooks or sheet music or things. And so a lot of the songs that we do, it's call and response. And that that the leader would say something, and then the congregation would say something back to the leader based on what the leader had said. And that's the kind of sparring partner that I was with her. All of those things just to say, I hear you and I understand and I know why that makes you feel good. Yeah, I hear you. Say some more. Somebody else needs to hear. That's really what that's all about. That's really what that's all about. And I loved every minute of singing backup with her, because that's what I was trained to do. That's what I was trained to do. It wasn't until very late. Wasn't until, I was in I was in my 40s before I actually began to look at taking a co-leadership situation with her. And that's because she wanted it that way, because she wanted the group to go on. She wanted the legacy of the Ingramettes. She wanted that to continue, even when she was no longer physically able to do it.
It's just so interesting to think of her planning for a future without herself. And I'm wondering how, in those plans, how did that help you adjust and deal with reality as she got older? Okay, so it didn't help. I didn't want to do this. I thought my mom would just be here forever until we all got tired of doing this. It's very funny because I'm an ordained Baptist minister. I just preached a sermon about 2 Sundays ago about Elijah and Elisha, his protege, and Elijah being taken up in a whirlwind and dropping his mantle, and Elisha on the ground, seeing his master taken away to heaven, and he picks up the mantle. But he asks him, "Listen, what can I do for you before I go?" And he says, "All I want is a double portion of the anointing that's on your life." He said, "Well, if you see me when I'm gone, it'll be yours." And so Elisha picks up the mantle. But here is what I didn't understand at the time when I sat there at my mom's bedside, and all of this played out, just she and I, because I had brought her home to live with me, and because that's what oldest daughters do. I brought her home to live with me. By the time she got had begun to get stage 4 Alzheimer's, the only thing that she would remember would be the music. Now, she could still sing every verse, every line, and sing it if she was singing the whatever part she was singing, the soprano, the alto, she could sing. When I would take her to the doctors, Cindy, and he was gauging how much of her memory she still had, and he'd say, "Mrs. Ingram, can you repeat these numbers, 4, 5, 7?" And she would just look at him. And he said, "Okay, let me try another one. 2, 1, 6." And I would stop him. I would say, "No, you're asking her the wrong thing." And I would begin to sing. I would begin to sing the song, a hymn. I would say, "Oh, how I love Jesus." And she joined right in harmony with me. "Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus, because he first loved me." And the doctor would sit there and scratch his head and say, "That's amazing." And it didn't matter what song I sang, she could still sing it. But she couldn't remember, and at one point, I don't think she really knew who I was. But she always thought about her dad. She says, "Daddy coming to get us? Is Daddy coming to get us?" And that's how I could get her to get dressed and all that kind of stuff. "Yeah, Daddy's coming." And I'm like, "Oh, Lord, please forgive me for this. I'm just, yeah, Daddy's coming to get us. We got to get dressed now." And she just gets so happy and put on all her clothes and and everything, but that I didn't really. I picked up that mantle. See, with that type of that type of blessing, now being the lead, the matriarch of the family, the lead singer for this group, with that comes great responsibility.
And you know, a lot of times there is no blessing without responsibility. And this has been, and now here we are in another, things have taken another turn. I got to tell you, the pandemic for me, things that I wish I had done before the pandemic got here, it's forced me to, now I have a Facebook page. We have a website. See, I didn't want to learn any of that stuff. I really didn't. I'm like, okay, I'm just happy going to these little churches and singing to these people and going to the folk festival and singing. No. Now I got to learn how to do. Tomorrow, we're going to be doing a virtual concert in your ear. Their Facebook page is going to be streamed on In Your Ear in Richmond and on their YouTube channel. We'll be doing something at 7:30 tomorrow night, a virtual concert. Because I can't go out and meet the people. And so now I'm out there on Facebook. I have an event page up and that's what I'm saying. See, when you and I were trying to get the Zoom working, I got to tell you, it's not going back to the way it used to be. So here's another responsibility, but I truly believe this is what Jesus meant when he told the disciples, greater works than I'm doing will you be able to do. And everybody's going, huh? Who can do any greater works than Jesus can? Yeah, you can, because now where I would reach 1,000 people at a church, 500 people, 40 people at a church. The thing goes over the internet now, and I got 12,000 likes, and 12,000 people have seen this. You know how many little small churches I'd have to go to see 12,000 people. Right. So
a lot of churches.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, it's been a real responsibility. I knew we would have responsibilities when I picked up Mama's mantle, when I picked up the legacy and said, okay, we'll keep the legacy going, because she asked us to do that. The last program that she was able to go out with us, and when she wasn't able to travel anymore, we had to go to Delaware, and I didn't want to go without her. And she said, no, you all go on. You're ready now. And because I want you all to keep this going. And she said that to us. And I've tried to honor that. I've tried to honor that. And that's how we get to where we are today. I've tried just to honor what I was asked to do. After I agreed, I said, okay, I'll do this. And I got the final blessing. I was there for the final blessing from her. And so
children do what they're told.
I believe, listen, you, oh my goodness, I've got grandchildren now that are in their 30s, and oh my goodness, and now with Oprah and Dr. Phil and I get a real hard line on that, but that's exactly what I did. I did what I and out, not only just, I guess, that I was told to do it, but then at some point, I wanted to do it. I wanted to honor her in this way. And here is what I said. Even if because I'm not doing this so that I can, people are like, you've got very big shoes to fill. And I'm like, no, all I have to do is walk in the shoes that I have on. And if I just do what I'm supposed to do in the shoes that I have on, whatever God has for me, I will see that. I will see that come through. And all I want to do is live a life. If I live a life like my mom did, that would honor God and that would be a blessing to others, then I'll be okay. That's all I want to do. That if you can get those two things down, you'll be okay.
Can you talk a little bit more about how you see diversity and inclusion in these folk festivals? Because working in the folk music world, there's been a lot of talk recently about how a lot of folk festivals and a lot of folk organizations are pretty predominantly white spaces. And of course, like how these organizations would like to change that, But what does it look like from your perspective?
No, and now you have to understand. You're talking from the perspective of not an organizer or not a planner, but someone who's been invited in from the perspective of the guest artists. And the first things that we do, we actually look at the different, oh my gosh, the different genres that are presented. They had Chinese acrobat dancers, and I've seen this at the Richmond Folk Festival. No, it's not all white. It really is. It's a myriad of all cultures, and trying to include them. It's only going to last a few days, and so they're trying to get as much as they can get in just the few days that we're out there to actually and then to showcase things that you may never have seen had you not come to the folk festival. I got to tell you, we went to Serbia and Bulgaria in 2019, and yeah, we were some of the only black folks that I saw there. So, but we were received with, oh my gosh, we sang at a Jewish synagogue, we sang at a Catholic cathedral while we were there, we sang at one of the schools, we sang at one of the cultural art centers, we sang, we were just. It was an experience that we never would have gotten had we not, done the traveling there. Well, everybody can't go overseas, so they bring just a little bit of it over here, and you can only cram so much of it into a 4-day festival or a 3-day or 5-day festival. But I truly believe that organizers and planners, that they work exceedingly hard. John Lohman and Folk Life, Virginia Folk Life, part of the Virginia Humanities, they have always worked so hard to see that we get as much as we can to they've got folk artists there, they've got people from other countries there just to share. And so I don't know how the other people are seeing it, but I see it on the rise, where the world is actually getting smaller for us because we're seeing so much more of it. I believe there is a concerted effort, an intentional effort to bring together even more cultures, even more the diversity of cultures and the people in those countries, to bring them together so that they get to see us, we get to see them, and then they make time for us. We do workshops together. We, just not to hear you sing, but they even bring in things where you get to see other parts of people's culture. So somebody makes violin, somebody learns how to shuck oysters, in West Point, Virginia. Somebody, just as much as they can do to say, listen, the world is not that big a place, and we want to bring it. We want to bring it to you so that you're exposed to other cultures and the way that other people think, the way that other people talk, the way that the music of other cultures, because it's not all 3-part harmonies and everything the way we do it. Mm-hmm. But you get an appreciation for it. You get an appreciation for it because it is part of who they are. It's what they've grown up with, just like I've grown up with the traditional gospel music.
Before we end, I was hoping that we could do something kind of fun called the lightning round.
Okay.
All right, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, what is your karaoke song?
Killing Me Softly.
Oh my gosh, I bet that's so great. Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
How do you take your coffee?
Cream and sugar.
What is your favorite junk food?
Pork rinds, fried pork rinds. Oh, this is easy.
Favorite U.S. city?
Miami.
First album you bought with your own money?
Marvin Gaye.
Whoa.
Marvin Gaye. I think he was in London somewhere. Live. It was a live Marvin Gaye album.
Ooh,
yeah.
Excellent. What was your first concert?
We were on stage in Miami, Florida with Aretha Franklin and the Mighty Clouds of Joy, and we were just little kids. But
oh my gosh.
Yeah, we were on stage. We were on stage with Aretha Franklin, Edna Gallman Cook, and the Mighty Clouds of Joy.
Was that in 1960?
Lord, no. We were still in Florida. It was in a place called the Longshoreman's Hall down by the river. Yeah.
Wow. That's the best answer you've ever had. What is the last book you read?
The Politics of Jesus by Aubrey M. Hendricks Jr.
It's very on brand for you.
Yeah.
Are you a morning person or a night owl?
I'm a night owl.
Would you rather be able to fly or be invisible?
I'd rather be invisible.
Star Trek or Star Wars?
Star Trek.
And the last question, where's the most beautiful place you've ever visited?
The Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C.
Wow, interesting answer.
That's crazy, but it's true. It's true. When I saw the paint, they've got a painting in there that looks like a newspaper, and I thought it was a newspaper. And then the person that was the person that was guiding us around, they said, "Nope, that's painted." And I'm like, "Wow, yeah, that's all I got." Look, little print looks like newspaper print. You agree? Yeah, that's a painting. Yeah,
amazing. Well, that was a really good lightning round. You did very well.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me. You're such an inspiring, lovely person. I was so excited, just really looking forward to this conversation, and you didn't let me down.
Thank you, Cindy. No, listen, I'm always ready to do that because I've lived it. I've lived it, and you can't go wrong when you share who you are with people. There's a bit of vulnerability that comes through that with singing about your life and oh my goodness and sharing who you are with people. But there's no other reason to do it if you're not going to share who you are. Yeah. And let them get to know you, and through their responses to you, you get to know them. It's a great feeling.
You're so good at talking.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Cindy. All right, listen, let me know when the podcast plays.
Basic Folk produced by Laura McCarthy this week. Lindsay Myers is our business manager. Alex Stanton of the band Townspeople composes our music. Basic Folk is proud to be on the American Songwriter Podcast Network. I'm Cindy Howes. Thank you so much for listening. And if you enjoyed this, please share it with a friend, subscribe, review, do all that. And you can find all of the episodes at our website, cindyhouse.net. And thanks. We'll talk to you next week. Okay, bye.